Oh, it's time once again to welcome you back to what I've chosen to call a history of rock and roll in film and rock and roll. You may call it what you like. Well, I have been playing around with new books and new gear. New pedals. Well, not necessarily a lot of new pedals, but the same pedals I had that I went and mixed with another pedal. I found a little inexpensive 3-channel mixer thing that's a tiny little box with 3 volume knobs on it. So there's a lot of music on this episode that's just straight from about 10 minutes of me dinking around with that little mixture of my pedal board and my head rush floor unit and a fun guitar that I put together a while back with a bunch of spare parts. But back to the books. I got a stack here of things that I recently have been plonking my eyeballs upon and marking spots to come back to later, either in my own memory or with little pieces of paper. And I just decided to give in. I'm giving in to the urge and the impulse to record little bits of stuff that I found interesting in some books I've been checking out lately on the subject of rock and roll. Now, one of them is a Lynyrd Skynyrd bio called Whiskey Bottles and Brand New Cars, The Fast Life and Sudden Death of Lynyrd Skynyrd by Mark Rybowski. This is grabbed it off the shelf of the library while I was grabbing a couple of other things, a couple of movies, and every time I'm at the public library, I swing by the music section just to check on some books that I may have meant to grab earlier and didn't have time for or haven't seen yet. And this is one that I have seen on the shelf many times, and I figured to get around to it eventually. I was I'm not like terribly fixated on the history of Lynyrd Skynyrd necessarily. I watched a VHS cassette documentary in 1999 about them that the band had put out, and that's about it, I think, as far as historical materials that I've absorbed of theirs. So that was 27 years ago. How about a book? How about flipping through a book? Okay. This is not necessarily a review of that book. I've only jumped into a couple of spots in it. And both times I did, I was into it. They had me, or rather, Mr. Mark Rybowski had me. There's a few different spots in the book that I feel like jumping back into. If you know me, you know the way I read stuff on the show. It's not even just about the information as much as it is about the writing itself. And beyond what I learn about the artist I'm checking out, the environment the artist grew up in or existed within or worked within is always most of the story, really. And it turns out there's a lot going on in the early years of Skynyrd when it comes to being a band in the South that's trying to break out at a time when having long hair is weird if you're a guy and brings a lot of trouble, and you're a rowdy bunch of boys. Apparently, Ronnie Van Zant saw the inside of a lot of jailhouses throughout his teen years and part of his 20s. There's a little anecdote about a NASCAR race at Speedway Park, and the author calls it a half-mile long brickyard a few blocks from Ronnie Van Zant's house. At one of the stock car or NASCAR race events that were held there from 1947 to 1963. Its grounds are a housing complex today. A number of race car drivers lived in Jacksonville, this is Florida, which is the state in the American Union where Lynyrd Skynyrd is from, if you don't know. But Leroy Yarborough was the best. Leroy, who won 14 NASCAR races and earned over $1 million in 1969 alone, lived on the west side near the track and was a favorite of the Shantytown boys. I had no idea how troubled he was until he was committed in 1980 after trying to strangle his mother. But at the November 1963 Grand National race at the Oval, a black driver, Wendell Scott, beat Leroy and everyone else, breezing to his only career win. Still the only Grand National event won by a black driver. However, Scott had to endure a charade. When local NASCAR officials, apparently loath to the reaction of handing the trophy to a black man in the Deep South, they didn't want me out there kissing any beauty queens, Scott said, because I imagine that's who's presenting you with a trophy and maybe some champagne at the end of the race, right? There's a pretty gal that won the local beauty pageant that gets to kiss you for photographs and stuff. So they give the winning prize trophy to the second place finisher, even though he was two laps behind, according to this book. That's a lot, isn't it? 2 whole laps around the track. Just like, hey, he's white. Here you go. And just everyone, I mean, can you imagine being there and watching that and just knowing that everyone's going along with it? The book says, if most of the crowd was content with this theft, Ronnie, who was there with a buddy, Gene Odom, was not. Leroy don't mind racing with him, meaning the guy that actually won, Scott, the black man, Wendell Scott. It's like, yeah, the guy that he beat had no problem being on the track with him. What's the problem? You know, and then he says, and if he can beat Leroy, he deserves to win. And then the book says, well, no one would have called Ronnie Van Zant a flaming liberal. Neither would anyone ever see a trace of knee-jerk Southern prejudice. And matter-of-fact logic, which always cut through the bullshit with him, left an impression on Odom, who years later said, I thought a little differently about black people after that, and I began to realize that Ronnie saw things in a different light than most of the rest of us. It says then in Jacksonville, where it took until 2014 to change the name of Nathan B. Forrest High School, so christened in 1959 for a Confederate general, and the first Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. That was not an easy light to see. NASCAR would eventually award Scott the win. 2 years later, I assume that's 2 years after. I don't know if that means 2 years after the actual race or 2 years after what they're saying about 1959, the Nathan B. Forrest High School. Or if they mean, like the way it's written, it's weird. 2 years later, would eventually win this. Yeah. But it was not until 2010, 20 years after Scott had died, that the association sent his family the winner's trophy for that landmark victory. Those are the kinds of Southern traditions that Ronnie Van Zant could do without. So I don't know what year they're talking about when it comes to the 2 years later. As usual, I should go back to, reminding myself when it's published in a book, it's not the fault of the author. It's the fault of the editor. So fuck your editor, Mark Rabowski, especially if it's you. How dare you confuse me that way? That really just, oh God, that grinds my gears. That whole, well, we'll acknowledge the win that everybody saw years after it actually happened. But it's going to be until you've been dead for a long time that we'll let your family have the honor that we denied you. God, just, these are the traditions that kept black and white people from being buried in the same graveyards for many generations. What do you? Yeah. I'm from the Pacific Northwest. I don't know what it's like to grow up there. So, fucking God, that must have sucked in a lot of ways, though, to just watch something happen in front of you on a racetrack and then watch everyone go along with the lie in 1960, whatever that was. Anyways, moving on to another bit later in the book. 2/3 of the way through the book, they still haven't gotten as far as partway through 1976, which is great for a book about Skynyrd. I was worried I'd find out that like halfway through we're in the 80s where the band's getting back together and replacing Ronnie with his younger brother and, making cassette tape record albums that people generally aren't buying. Whatever Lynyrd Skynyrd did in the time that most of them were alive, I applaud them. But I've got no trash to talk when it comes to bands sticking it out or getting back together, reforming with other singers. The more musicians get paid for making music and the more they can make a living making music, I don't give a rat's ass how they do it. Even if it's, I don't give a rat's ass even if it's illegal the way they do it. I'm just reading about it years later. I don't have a dog in that fight, but I'd rather people make music that other folks want to hear. Sure. So there's this weird bit at this point in the book. It's about, page 170, talks about, let's see, a deepening chasm between actual reality and Ronnie's reality, the best of which could be seen on a stage or on a vinyl record, and the worst of which could be seen most everywhere else. If he had learned he had little to fear from the American justice system, being able to get loose on foreign soil led him and the others in his trail to think they had even less to worry about. Skynyrd's second European tour would be perhaps the single most concentrated period of havoc they ever created. It was a wonder that Rosington, guitar player Gary Rosington, Van Zant's fishing mate and punching bag made it home intact. It only took 8 shows on the tour for all hell to break loose. In Portsmouth, England, before a show on October 25th, again with Black Sabbath, drunken Ronnie got into an argument with Gary over, of all things, how to pronounce schnapps. As much as was ever needed for him to start something. He broke a bottle of whiskey over John Butler's head, just like in a movie, leaving him bleeding profusely, and then grabbed a shard of broken glass and began slashing at Gary's wrists, leaving a deep cut on Gary's hand. His left hand, providentially, not the one he played his guitar with. Gary, well, you play your guitar with both hands, Mark Rabowski. So it's good to distinguish fretting hand and picking hand. I get what you're saying. I forget if Gary's a lefty or a righty when it comes to the pick, but whatever. He's trying to say it's not Gary's dominant hand apparently, but when you're playing guitar, you fucking need both to play, Skynyrd songs. Don't send me links to TikTok videos of someone playing all of Freebird unaccompanied with one hand. I don't have time for that. No one's got time for that. I've just, are we done? We probably are done sharing the videos of 4-year-old children playing the entire length and breadth and depth of John Bonham's combined drum solos effortlessly because their insane, awful parents have made them play the drums that way for more than half their 4-year-old life. Anyway, I hope that's gone. I hope we're not doing that. We're not doing that, are we? No, we're doing other stuff with the social media videos. I get it. Yes, but still, that's demoralizing for so many reasons. This makes you think I've never done anything with my life as a musician, right? I could be torturing a child instead, making them a better musician than I'd ever be for that 4 years. Jesus. Anyhow, the next bit says Gary Rosington, defending himself, grabbed Ronnie's neck, choking him. But Ronnie, the fighter, broke free and continued his slashing, cutting both of Rosington's hands and breaking his own right hand in the process. The melee, like a hockey fight, seemed to peter out by mutual consent. Just another day in Skynyrdville. Ronnie and Gary, I mean, this is not exactly Robert E. Howard when it comes to the description of action taking place between two bare-fisted fighters. They're not bare-fisted, Jay. They're holding slashy things. Okay. Between two men, the pacing and the description of the action is not the greatest. May I possibly recommend Dog Rounds as a book that's pretty good at detailing some things that happen between people fighting each other. I'll get around to reading more of that on my YouTube channel someday. I totally intend to. Let's see. This is the part I really wanted to highlight. This is very important. Again, when I say that this all comes down to the editor, and whatever intern did the copy editing and the helpful, internet searches for Mark Grabowski. If there was no intern and Mark did this himself, he should feel bad about it. But also whoever the editor. All right, am I looking up the editor at the beginning? Are you guys is anyone that's listening to this getting seriously pissed off at me? I was going to go to the front and check it out. But I don't see a credit. Do they usually credit editors on the publisher information page? I don't know. It's been too long. Let's see. So here's the part that I really wanted to get to. And this is why people that put this book out should be a little ashamed for a minute. Ronnie and Gary made the usual trip to the hospital for their hands to be bandaged, and then were taken back to the arena. The bandages added to the Skynyrd shtick, but Rosington's hands were damaged enough that he had to play guitar with two fingers for a while. While both men had forgotten all about the ugly scene, it left Ozzy Osbourne and his own prototypical band of mental cases baffled. Are you ready for this next bit? Sabbath guitarist Zakk Wylde, spelled Zakkwylde, so they spelled his stage name correctly. So it was a copy and paste. It's a copy and paste from a website, I assume, who is Black Sabbath's Ozzy Osbourne guitar player. This is I don't think we can blame AI. What's the copyright on this book? 2015. Zakk Sabbath was a thing. So what if somebody drunkenly did a speech to text search on their phone in 2015, and they said Black Sabbath, and then they said Black Sabbath guitar player, but it sounded to the phone like Zakk Sabbath guitar player, and it was Zakk Wylde, and someone like screenshotted that. 25 years ago, 10 years ago, 11 years ago. How easy was that? I forget. Whatever. I'm trying to recreate the scene of a crime here in my own head / codpast. But it says, Zakk Wylde, Sabbath guitarist, said, all I remember was that the guitar player came out with a bandage on his hand and the singer came out with a bandage on his head, and they were hugging each other saying, I'm sorry, brother. I love you, man. That's my impression of Tony Iommi, Black Sabbath guitar player, but without an English accent, I guess. That's a very terrible impression. If it was Zakk, I guess, depending on the year and what era of Zakk Wylde it might be. 2015 Zakk Wylde. All I remember was that the guitar player came out with a bandage on his hand and the singer came out with a bandage on his head. And they're hugging each other saying, I'm sorry, brother. I love you, man. It was too much for Artemis Pyle. That's the drummer, right? Who recalls the broken glass incident as really scary. As he had after Ed King's departure, Pyle said he had a major confrontation with Ronnie the next day. I busted his door down. I was ready to whip his ass. I said, how can you do that to people you love? He said, I was drunk. Hearing that old dodge again, Artemis told him, that's bullshit. That's no excuse. Even so, if any bobbies come look for Mr. Van Zant, it wasn't with an arrest warrant or came looking for attempted homicide, but for an autograph. No wonder Leon always donned a bobby hat when he played London. And the band would write on its next album cover, thanks to the people of Europe. What's more, the incident was played in the rock press as just another story of Skynyrd making mayhem, even as parody. In New Musical Express, the writer gleefully called the tussle a bloodbath and chortled, "When a band starts slashing each other's wrists before gigs, you know they're confident." Oh, hey, you know what it is? It's, as I record this, a day in February 2026 that is on the edge of the double digits or is in the double digits of the dates that are in a month. And look what I see posted somewhere. Definitely in a book. It's in a book I read. It's not on. This is not something I found on Reddit while I was scrolling looking for other things. No, it's from it's a tome of history, and this tome of his leather bound, huge pages, small type. It says on February 7th, 2024, a musician named and DJ. Mojo Nixon passed away at age 66. 2 years later, James Van Eaton, who Mojo portrayed in Great Balls of Fire, passed away at age 86. Did I look this up on the Google search? Yes, I did. I mean, did I continue reading in the big book that had this historical information in it for me? That I own this big historic? Yes, I kept reading in the book. And it turns out, yeah, that is what happened. And I know all of you know this that are listening to my voice right now. Without a doubt, every single person listening right now knows what I'm about to say. I'm just going to say it anyway for the people that are listening that don't know it, which is nobody at all, because that would be dumb. The first couple episodes of A History of Rock and Roll and Film and Rock and Roll featured a exclusive and in-depth, some would say groundbreaking, I didn't say it. Some would. Look back on the history of a guy by the name Jerry Lee Lewis and a film by the name Great Balls of Fire. Now, I kind of freaked out while reviewing the film, realizing Mojo Nixon was playing the drummer, and didn't do any proper research into the life of the drummer from the book that I own, the big heavy tome with the thick pages. They're very tall. They got lots of tiny little letters on them because there's so much history and information in these books that I own. I didn't feel like reading that at the time, but I do now. So I'm going to click over to this tab that I'm going to flip. I'm going to flip the page over to the Jim Van Eaton section of that book that I've had for a long time because I'm a really smart person who does lots of reading and research. You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't because you're dumb. And I am here always being smart and always reading books. But not only that, I also am going to read from a few chapters of the same book about the history and life of Mojo Nixon. Let's start with Mr. Eaton, and this part of the pages of the book that I am reading from is entitled MemphisMusicHallOfFame.com/inductee/Jim Van Eaton. Don't ask me why the chapter's named that. It says, in both drumming and in life, timing is everything, and J.M. Van Eaton was a master at both. As the studio drummer for Sun Records, the Memphis native played on some of the most influential and enduring rock and roll songs of all time, setting a high water mark for all of those who would come after him. Despite his, the justification. I don't mean justification in terms of him and his life. I mean the formatting of the text. Oh, well, I can move the page, the tab, the window, the page. Okay, there we go. Now it's lining up better. Sorry, I was an editor of my high school newspaper back in the 90s, and I still recognize certain formatting options terribly from the days of Macintosh PageMaker. Here we go. Despite his many accomplishments, Van Eaton has remained deeply humble throughout his life, often pointing to being at the right place at the right time as the key to his success. And while his timing was undoubtedly beneficiary, G.M. Van Eaton was also the perfect man for his moment, an innovative and versatile drummer who elevated everyone around him. When guitars and drums collided, that changed music forever, and it hasn't changed since. As he himself will tell you, James Mack, nice, that's a badass name, James Mack Van Eaton's great career. His first great career move was being born in Memphis, Tennessee in 1937, placing him squarely within the ideal age cohort and geographical location to play a major role in the formation of rock and roll. That said, the luck of the draw is just one of many factors that would help shape Van Eaton into one of his generation's most notable drummers. From a young age, Van Eaton was enthralled with the music that he heard on the radio, most notably the New Orleans group, if you will, the Dukes of Dixieland. We could actually pick them up here in Memphis playing live from the Roosevelt Hotel in New Orleans. I love them because they would let the drummer take a little ride. He would remember. I don't know what that means, take a little ride. Damn it. Like banging on the ride cymbal. I have a friend named Dan Tyson who hates that a lot, on the banging on the bell. In rock and roll music anyway. Not so much in jazz, but it's a great way to make his big toe shrink back up into his boot, let's say, to use a reversal of a metaphor that, Little Richard used to say about getting turned on. He was also inspired by the black gospel and R&B groups that were ubiquitous around Memphis at the time, often visiting a church on Trigg Avenue to soak up the unique rhythms. It had a feel like Ray Charles and Aretha Franklin. I was in awe of all this. We wouldn't miss it for the world. It was an every Sunday night thing, he told authors Ross Johnson and Bob Bowman. Inspired by these musicians, I mean, we're assuming he's still pretty young then. He's born in like 37. What are we talking? 47? 1950 at the most? So probably before he heard the recorded versions, the recorded music of Aretha Franklin and Ray Charles. He's like, here's the thing. I love it. And then years go by, records come out, radio plays these songs. That's the thing that I love, that I heard outside this church or inside this church. It says visiting a church. It doesn't say he was attending mass or attending services or attending, just maybe he's walking by. I don't know. Inspired by these musicians, Van Eaton joined his middle school band. Okay, there we go. Middle school. So he's like 12, 13. So we're talking 47 to, right? 47 to 50, 19-ish of that. Century. That was the word I was looking for. I did not edit. I sat there and thought, what's the word? My 48-year-old brain said, what's the word for a group of years in 100 in the metric system? Because, as we know, in America, the metric system is illegal. I may be going to prison tomorrow. Anyway, it says he transitioned to drums, although his education was strictly relegated to marching band music. And as a teenager, wanting to branch out, he eventually saved up enough pocket money to buy his first set of drums. Soon after, Van Eaton formed his first band, the Jivin' Five. Hell yeah, that's a name. That's a good name for any band with 5 people or maybe 3 people in the entire United States of America at the time. Perfect. Who played Dixieland jazz, which he then followed up with an Elvis-inspired rock and roll band, the Echoes. Like Elvis before him, Van Eaton and the Echoes decided to record at Sun's studio. Good idea, kid. Which would allow anyone with enough money to cut an acetate. Wait, a revolutionary idea for a studio where if you just have enough money to pay them to record you. They record you? Sun Records? What is this? Madness. Madness, I say. Wow, crazy. That must have, anyone with the money to pay for them to record them got a recording. That's wild. Wild business model. Sam Phillips, you maniac, you commie, pinko, goofball, anarchist. Gee whiz. Okay. The next little bit is talking about Cowboy Jack Clement, a productor. I think that's the proper pronunciation. Producer. Oh, it's French. Le producteur Cowboy Jack Clement, who was instrumental in bringing the young drummer on board at Sun. Described James Van Eaton's playing as not fancy, but intense, spirited, and intricate. Every beat falls exactly where it needs to and does exactly what it needs to. After arriving at Sun, Van Eaton first started playing with Billy Lee Riley. Oh, yes! And his group, the Little Green Men. Oh, my God. Laying down the percussion on seminal early rockabilly numbers such as Red Hot and Flying Saucer Rock and Roll. Check those out for the love of pants. Please stop what you're doing, except for listening to this. Keep listening to this. Go to a streaming service or a record store, preferably a record store. Go to a record store and tell them you're on a streaming service, listening to a podcast, telling you to go to another streaming service to listen to music, unless they can sell you a copy of an acetate or a wax cylinder or a vinyl record 45 RPM of Flying Saucers Rock and Roll by Billy Lee Riley. Or Red Hot. My gal is red hot. Your gal ain't dooley squat. Whoa! That's it. That's the review. If that's not enough to make you want to buy them records, I hope it's enough to make you want to go to a Wi-Fi connection of some sort and listen to them records. Holy smokes. So there's a photograph of the 1957 original Little Green Men, J.M. Van Eaton, Jimmy Wisson, Billy Lee Riley with an amazing checkered jacket, Pat O'Neill, and Martin Willis. Says not long after joining Riley's band, Van Eaton would soon find that elusive hit record with the help of a hotshot piano player from Louisiana. In 1956, a then unknown artist named Jerry Lee Lewis arrived in Memphis to audition for Sun Records, and Van Eaton was called to accompany him. At first, the drummer was unsure of Lewis. Recalling decades later, man, I thought, this will never work. The guy plays piano, he doesn't sound like a rock and roller. He would quickly realize how wrong he was. During their initial session, the duo played a version of Ray Price's Crazy Arms, which was subsequently released as The Killers' first record. Not the rock music band from the early 2000s called The Bright Side, Mr. Killer's The Bright Side. I mean, The Killer, Jerry Lee Lewis. In 1957, the sales numbers on that record were upwards of, always a great qualifier, upwards of 30,000 copies, which I'm sure is correct. But, I have had upwards of 12 to 15 very satisfied partners in lovemaking at the age that I am today. Upwards of, let's see. It would be their subsequent recordings together that would make both of them iconic figures of early rock and roll. Not rich, but iconic figure. That's my note. In 57, Van Eaton and Jerry Lee teamed up to record on a song called Whole Lot of Shaking Going On, which they had performed many times while on the road to Rapturous. It's the Raptors from the Jurassic Park. The Raptures, Rapturous, the people that are also hybrid raptors that would go to rock and roll shows in the era we're talking about, the 1957 era Raptors. Like their previous single, Whole Lot of Shakin' was made in one take. I wasn't made in one take. Maybe they used the first take after they did a bunch of takes. It was written, it was workshopped, it was it was arranged, whatever. If you believe that it was one take, that, the version you've heard was the first take, great. Doesn't mean they didn't do 25 takes. Who knows? And if you want to point me towards all the books that say, oh, they did it in one take, okay, that's still eyewitness accounts. That's still, blessed are the cheesemakers, as you know. You know what I'm saying? Whole Lot of Shake was made in one take. Combination of Lewis's boogie piano and Van Eaton's energetically propulsive drumming proved irresistible to the public, and the single reached number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 and number 1 on both country and R&B charts. Jerry Lee Lewis and his style of playing and my style of playing were identical, said Van Eaton. I think it was a godsend that we showed up there at the same time. Some things are just destined to happen, and that was one of them. Realizing they had struck musical gold, Lewis and Van Eaton continued to churn out several more massive hits during 57, including Jerry Lee's signature smash, Great Balls of Fire. Their collaboration not only made Jerry Lee Lewis an international star, they also helped push drums into the forefront of rock music, and hell yes to that. I cannot tell you how important it is for the drums to really kick on a lot of that early rock and roll. When you listen to it, that snap of that snare, and the stand-up bass is doing a lot of work to back up any kick drum you can barely hear. It really, the driving rhythm of some of these bands, it sounds so fantastic when the drummer's really laying into it on that snare drum, and he's got a little sassiness, a little snappiness. Oh, it's just so integral to any of that, really. That's why some of those early songs can be very silly sounding and very goofy sounding. And audiences were fine with it. They had a great time with it because they were dancing to it at the time. And I think that's one thing. I'm saying this as a person who is thinking this for the first time in this very moment, but stay with me. I think that's one of the things that people don't credit guys like John Lennon with enough, but also over-credit John Lennon enough with. His later Beatles lyrics were pretty silly and off the cuff, off the dome, I would say. That's a technical term that I've just created and invented, so if you've ever used it, please send me a check. There's a lot of goofy, silly stuff in I Am the Eggman, in Come Together, and there's silly stuff in early rock and roll too, but it's not the whole song. It's an allusion here and there. It's a little wink and a nod. It's a little strange. It's a strange kind of candy-coated break for your brain in some of the lyrics of early rock and roll songs, especially from artists that most people don't know, that aren't in that top 8 to 10 artists that most people could probably think of if they had to. A lot of the ones that had a hit single here and there, a 45 that sold really well, maybe regionally, there's a lot of silly, goofy lyrics about King Kong or Little Green Men or goofy things like that. And I think guys like John Lennon in the 60s were just down when they were not in the mood to write a good love song that day, to just do a stream of consciousness, silly exercise. And I obviously there's there are plenty of Beatles fanatics that could tell me, well, actually, he was reading poetry by so-and-so in that year, and the year he wrote that lyric, it was direct. Great, love it, fine, you're right. I'm sure I don't know this stuff, but I think the element of whimsy in the brains of somebody who was in the Beatles, who loved Little Richard and Jerry Lee Lewis and Elvis, but also loved fantasy and things that don't have to mean everything, but then other things kind of did sometimes. I think there could have been a bit of a fun, like, acceleration button they hit, you know, a hyperspace button they hit in their brain when they go, you know what? I'm going to take all the innuendo I love from early rock and roll in America and R&B music, and I'm going to mix it with all the fairy tale Mother Goose rhymes that I grew up with, and I'm just going to make an obnoxious song that has tons of just my own versions of that. Everything you just heard are things that this is out of the book that I'm, the big book of rock and roll research that I'm constantly writing. I mean, reading. I'm reading from it. Future me wrote the book. Future me dictated the book to someone that wrote it down, and I'm reading from it now in the present. It says, while Van Eaton credits his work with Lewis in helping to make the drummer an integral part of rock and roll during the 1950s and beyond, he says that their unique chemistry proved difficult to replicate. Yeah, I could see that. A lot of people try to copy the sound we got with Jerry Lee Lewis, but they'll never copy it because they're trying to play a straight 4/4 beat, and in fact, it's a shuffle with the backbeat. I could never play that straight country shuffle, maybe for 8 or 16 bars, but after that, I start falling off the stool. I've got to concentrate, and when you concentrate, you lose the feeling. For a drummer who enjoyed experimentation and trying out different styles, Son's bohemian approach to making music was a natural fit for Van Eaton's sensibilities. With a green light to utilize differing techniques, Van Eaton became one of the most versatile drummers of his era and an inspiration to millions of aspiring musicians. You would get pretty creative in that Sun studio because if you're not, you're going to get left behind. So most all that stuff was pretty spontaneous and creative. That's what made it so popular, made it what it was, and it just happened to fit, he recalled. Due to this creative flexibility, one of Van Eaton's greatest assets was his ability to shift tempos and styles depending on the needs of the performer with whom he was working. In addition to his work with Billy Lee Riley and Jerry Lee Lewis, Van Eaton, oh my God, here we go, laid down his fiery beat for the likes of Johnny Cash on Ballad of a Teenage Queen. Yes! And I guess things happen that way. Ba-doop-a-doo, ba-doop-a-doo. Ba-doop-a-doo. God damn it. I love those ba-doop-a-doos. And that Johnny Cash song so much. The ba-doop-a-doos in I guess things happen that way to me are like, I like the oh in Ramones songs like Chainsaw, you know? Oh, wow, wow, wow. Oh man. The ba-doop-a-doos. If you have a Johnny Cash tribute called the Ba-Doop-A-Doos, number one, I hope you're all dressed like the Oompa Loompas from, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I would follow your band around all the time. Like somebody who likes, is Fish still a band? Is Fish a bit? If the Grateful Dead band of Fish and the Matthews, Dave, I would follow you around. If you had a band called the Ba-Doop-A-Doos, I'd follow you around a lot. And then I would definitely tell you that, here in San Diego, I know someone whose floor you could sleep on, and then you would sleep on their floor. And then I would follow you to your next show, and you would probably expect more strange hospitality from people you never met. And in reality, I would just spend the next 15 shows just waiting to find out where are we sleeping tonight, everyone? And you'd be like, well, you're not in the band. I'm like, no, yeah, remember we that's what we do. We sleep on other people's floors, like that time in San Diego. And you'd be like, yeah, that was you finding us a place to sleep. And we could use a Jay. We could, oh man, you came through for us that time. Really, you were really great. Yeah, I was. So where are we going now, guys? Dudes, ladies, are some of you ladies? Jay, we just don't know if this is a great fit for us. We really have a lot to figure out before the next show. And I know that, you guys. I know. I'm just gonna, we've been partners. No, Jay, we've been partners in the past, and it's worked out really well. We're going through a rough patch right now. I think it's time for bed. I think let's lay down and go to. We don't have any place. I know, because you guys haven't found the place yet, or the person that's going to let us sleep in their apartment. But if you could do that sooner than later, I think we'd all agree. I'm not just speaking for myself here, everybody, right? I mean, we would all agree that that's probably for the best if we could bed down soon. Because I mean, I'm like 1,500 miles from home, and I know you guys are probably, you're from. Where are you from? Uzbekistan. Yeah, exactly. Near Sheboygan. And we're only 500 miles from there. So we should all probably find places. Now, to balance all that out, let's go to Mojo Nixon's bio. This is on mojonixon.com. And it says 8/2/57. Mojo Nixon, born in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I've been there. I've been to Chapel Hill. I've played in Chapel Hill. I've had van issues in Chapel Hill. That's all I got. I liked it. I liked Chapel Hill. I wish I could go back. 7/4/62, Nixon family moves to Danville, VA. 2/8/64, Nixon gets his first LP, Meet the Beatles, and is convinced that I Saw Her Standing There actually begins 1, 2, 3, fuck! 3/28/67, Mojo hears Sweet Soul Music by Arthur Conley on his father's radio station, WILA, the black spot on your dial. Music claims his soul and Satan crawls up his butt. 6/10/70, Nixon hears Velvet Underground Sister Ray and smokes pot for the first time at a Methodist Youth Fellowship weekend retreat. That's 13 years old, according to this timeline. 6/14/71, a 14-year-old Nixon arrested for protesting leash law at City Hall. Wears shirt proclaiming the slogan, "Free the dogs!" Nixon spends his time in the back of a police car humming MC5 songs that threaten to kill the mayor. 6/15/71, Nixon's father handcuffs him to the lawnmower until both front and backyards are mowed. 4/5/72, Nixon begins practicing, in quotes, drums in his basement. This causes his 76-year-old grandmother to beg to be taken to a nursing home. 8/2/72, for his 15th birthday, Big Daddy Nixon takes him to see a Richard Pryor movie where the joys of the word motherfucker are discovered. 8/2/74, for his 16th birthday, Big Daddy Nixon takes him to see Richard Petty race at Orange County Speedway. Last dirt track on the NASCAR circuit. Oh. After the race, the Nixons visit stock car driver and fellow Danvillian Wendell Scott in the pits. Oh my God, I'm bringing it all around full circle. Now that means I can't do other bits in this episode of the Codcast featuring any other artists unless NASCAR factors in, because we started with Lynyrd Skynyrd and NASCAR. All right, this is how we're going to round it out. Now I know the conclusion, the denouement, if you will. I hope you won't. 10/13/73, Nixon gets to see Led Zeppelin at Greensboro Coliseum, and for the first time sees the pot-smoking, beer-sucking, denim-clad rock army. 8/2/74, while on a family vacation, Nixon plays Elvis's Promised Land 14 consecutive times on a diner jukebox. All the while, his parents try to use his 17th birthday as an excuse to talk to him about his future. 9/4/75. Nixon begins college at Miami University. It was the furthest college away from his hometown that accepted him. Frampton Comes Alive is the number one album in America. Nixon is secretly listening to Patti Smith's Gloria over and over and over again. 4/21/76, while listening to Blue Oyster Cult records and drinking Mad Dog 2020, Nixon reads Hunter Thompson's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas out loud to a young virgin trapped in his room. Notice it doesn't mention the gender or sex of that virgin. I'm just going to assume that's his roommate. 7/20/78, Nixon is knocked unconscious by Clarence Big Man Clemens at a Springsteen concert in Charleston, South Carolina for jumping on stage during an encore. 11/20/78, Big Daddy Nixon goes to join Otis Redding in the Great Beyond. 6/10/79, Nixon graduates college and moves to England hoping to join the Clash, winds up playing Dion and Jerry Lee Lewis songs in the underground for money. Now, I believe, for my American listeners, including myself, that is the subway tunnels underground, not the underground scene of rock musicians. I'm just guessing. 1/30/80, Nixon gives up on his Clash dreams. He moves to Denver and begins to work for Vista, organizing winos into workforces and entertains them on breaks by singing Woody Guthrie and Leadbelly songs. 5/12/80, hears George Thorogood on the radio and decides he is now a singer and a guitar player. That's the most satisfying thing I've read in a long time. 11/20/80, Nixon and his punk band Zebra 123 are questioned by the Secret Service for their part in the assassination ball at Denver's notorious punk club Malfunction Junction. 2/7/81, lack of poontang causes Nixon to follow college girlfriend to San Diego, California. 8/30/81, a Howlin' Wolf only edict on his turntable drives Kate Bush loving girlfriend away. 9/2/81, Nixon meets a fellow San Diego musician and D mentor, country Dick Montana. Much drinking and carousing ensue. 10/1/81, experiences Country Dick and the Snuggle Bunnies playing the wreck of the old 97 at a Neo strip joint and gets laid. Nixon decides to stay in San Diego. 10/14/82, Nixon and two buddies begin a bicycle trip from San Diego to Danville, Virginia. 10/20/82, 6 days later, after drinking too many Skylab Fallouts on Bourbon Street in New Orleans, Mojo has the Mojo Nixon revelation that gives birth to the idea of playing guitar, hollering about injustice, having a good time, drinking, and fornicating. Mojo equals voodoo. Nixon equals bad politics. How is that? Now, that's just the first half of his bio. I think I'll save the second half for the next episode. How do you like that? How you like that, folks? Woo, I want to say something I haven't said in a while on this show, and it is that you deserve to be loved. You deserve to have a good time. You deserve to be able to do creative things that make you happy. If you have forgotten that, it's okay. Just do whatever it takes to remind yourself every day when you get up, every day when you go to bed, all the parts in between when you're eating stuff, if you can. If you can't, it's okay to reach out to somebody else and tell them to help you remember things that make it okay for you to get up in the morning and eat things and go to bed at night. Rock and roll is the best. And so are you.